What happens when the man who left you for a perfect life is forced to watch you live a life beyond his wildest dreams? This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's about the brutal, beautiful, and often shocking way the universe settles its debts. It's the story of Marie Cutrona, a woman cast aside for not being ambitious enough, and how she found herself in the arms of a man so powerful his shadow eclipsed everything her ex-husband ever hoped to be. We're going to follow a twisted path of jealousy obsession, and the moment a scorned ex-wife didn't just get revenge, she became the one thing her replacement could never be genuinely happy. Stick with me, because you are about to hear how one woman's quiet dignity became the loudest sound in the room, shattering a picture-perfect facade and exposing the ugly truth hiding behind it. The divorce decree had felt like a death certificate for a life she once thought was hers. But the true funeral, the final shovelful of dirt on the coffin of her past, arrived via a blindingly bright Instagram post. It was a photo of her ex-husband, Liam Sterling, on one knee on a picturesque cliffside in Positano. Before him, his girlfriend of 18 months, Isabella Thorne, had her manicured hands clasped over her mouth in a perfect pantomime of surprise. The caption penned by Liam was a dagger coated in sugar. She said, "Yes, from the moment I met Isabella, I knew what it meant to be with a partner who inspires you to conquer the world. She is grace, ambition, beauty, and strength all rolled into one perfect soul. I can't wait to build our empire together. This is what life is supposed to feel like." Every word was a carefully chosen missile aimed directly at her heart. Ambition. Conquer the world. Empire. These were the words he had used against her in their final soul-crushing arguments. He had called her complacent. He said she was content with their small life, while he was destined for more. Their life hadn't felt small to her. It had felt warm, full of inside jokes, lazy Sunday mornings, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone's rhythm as well as your own. She had supported his career in finance, hosting dinner parties for his bosses, and proofreading his presentations until her eyes burned. She put her own passion, illustrative design, on the back burner, telling herself there would be time for it later after he made partner. But later never came. He made partner, and suddenly their cozy two-bedroom home felt like a cage to him. The women he met at corporate galas were CEOs, founders, women who wore power suits like a second skin, women like Isabella. Isabella Thorne was by all accounts flawless. A Wharton graduate who had launched her own successful marketing firm by 30, she was a symphony of polished excellence. Her hair was a glossy, impossible shade of raven black. Her body was honed by a personal trainer, and her social media was a curated gallery of charity galas, keynote speeches, and 10-day detox retreats in Bali. She was everything Marie wasn't. Marie was quiet. She was commanding. Marie preferred old books to boardrooms. Her idea of a perfect evening was a glass of wine and a sketchbook, not networking over canapes. Liam had not just left her, he had upgraded. He made sure the world knew it. His Instagram, once filled with their goofy hiking selfies and pictures of the dog they had shared, was now a shrine to Isabella. Photos of them clinking champagne glasses on a yacht. Photos of them in matching designer ski gear in Aspen. Photos of her looking pensively out a window with a caption from Liam about her brilliant mind. Her life, in contrast, felt like a grainy black and white film. She lived in a small apartment across town, the kind with thin walls where you could hear your neighbors' arguments. She had taken a stable but uninspiring graphic design job at a mid-level insurance company, creating soulless brochures and web banners. It paid the bills, but it chipped away at her spirit with every sterile corporate logo she designed. Her friends, especially her best friend Chloe, tried their best. "He's a narcissist, Marie," she'd say over a bottle of cheap Pinot Noir. "He needs a trophy, not a partner. You're better off." Marie knew she was right logically, but logic is a cold comfort when your heart is shivering. She would scroll through Liam's life, a masochistic ritual of self-torture. She'd see the comments from their old mutual friends. "So happy for you both. She's perfect for you, Liam. Couple goals. Each one felt like a small betrayal, a confirmation that she was the forgotten prequel to his epic love story. That night, staring at the engagement photo, the weight of it all crushed her. The ring on Isabella's finger was a monstrous diamond, a starburst of light that mocked the simple, delicate band Liam had given her years ago. She thought back to his proposal. It had been in their favorite park, a picnic blanket under a willow tree. It had been simple, private, and she had thought perfect. Now it felt cheap, inadequate. She threw her phone onto the sofa and curled into a ball, the silence of her apartment amplifying the roaring inadequacy in her head. She wasn't just heartbroken anymore. She felt erased. Liam had successfully rewritten their history, casting her as the lackluster first draft, and Isabella as the polished final masterpiece. And as she fell into a fitful sleep, she had no idea that her own story was about to take a turn so sharp and so spectacular that it would make Liam and Isabella's perfect life look like a cheap imitation. The universe was indeed about to settle its debts. The weeks following the engagement announcement were a blur of forced smiles and quiet desperation. She threw herself into her work at the insurance company, the monotony a welcome distraction. But her soul was starving. Her sketchbook lay gathering dust. Her pencils felt foreign in her hand. The creative spark that had once been her defining feature was now a pilot light flickering precariously close to extinguishing. One Saturday, determined to break the spell of her own misery, she decided to do something for the old Marie. Not the divorced, heartbroken Marie, but the one who existed before Liam. The one who could lose an entire afternoon in the hushed halls of an art museum, who found beauty in the cracks of a weathered stone, who believed that art could save your soul. She went to the Atherton, a grand old public library in the city's historic district, a place she hadn't visited in years. It was a cathedral of knowledge with soaring vaulted ceilings, the warm, comforting scent of aging paper and sunbeams that slanted through the towering, arched windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. She found a secluded carrel in the fine arts section, surrounded by heavy tomes on Renaissance painters and modern sculptors. For the first time in a long time, she opened her sketchbook. Her hand felt stiff, her lines uncertain. She started sketching the ornate carvings on the wooden bookshelf opposite her. It was clumsy at first, but slowly the old rhythm returned. The feel of the graphite gliding across the page, the focus required to capture a shadow, the way the world narrowed to just her and the paper. It was a form of meditation. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice the man who had taken a seat at the adjacent table until he spoke. "That's a beautiful study of light and shadow," a low, calm voice said. She jumped, startled. She looked up to see a man who seemed both out of place and perfectly at home in the quiet library. He was dressed in a simple, dark gray Henley and tailored trousers, no suit, no tie, but the fabric had a quality that spoke of quiet expense. He had kind eyes, a warm shade of hazel, and a light dusting of stubble on a strong jawline. But it was his focus that was most striking. He was looking at her sketchbook not with polite curiosity, but with genuine, intelligent interest. Embarrassed, she instinctively moved to close the book. "Oh, it's just a doodle. I'm a bit out of practice." "Please don't," he said, holding up a hand. "I'm sorry for startling you. I didn't mean to intrude. It's just, you have a real talent for capturing texture. The way you've rendered the grain of that oak is remarkable." No one had commented on her art with such specific insight in years. Liam used to just say, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to his laptop. She felt a flush creep up her neck. "Thank you. I used to draw all the time." "What stopped you?" he asked, his gaze gentle, not probing. The entire sordid story of her marriage threatened to spill out. She caught herself and offered a sanitized version. "Life, I guess. A job, a marriage. It got complicated." "I understand that." He nodded, a flicker of something knowing in his eyes. "My name is Julian, by the way." "Marie," she replied, the name sounding a little stronger in this new context. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't try to flatter her. They just talked. For nearly an hour they sat in that quiet corner of the library and spoke about art. He knew about the Dutch masters, the Impressionists, and even some of the contemporary digital artists she admired. He talked about how architecture was a form of public art, and how the design of a building could influence the mood of a city block. He listened, truly listened, asking questions that made her dig deeper into her own thoughts. It was the most engaging conversation she'd had in years. It was effortless. When he finally looked at his watch, he seemed genuinely disappointed. "I have a meeting I can't get out of," he said. "But Marie, I would be remiss if I didn't ask if I could see you again. Perhaps we could visit the art gallery next weekend. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new Rothko exhibit." Her heart did a strange little flutter. It wasn't the wild, chaotic beat she'd felt with Liam. It was a calmer, more hopeful rhythm. For the first time, she wasn't being asked out because she was someone's plus one, or because a friend was setting her up. This man, Julian, was interested in her mind, in her passion. "I'd like that very much," she said, a real unforced smile reaching her eyes. They exchanged numbers. As he walked away, she watched him go, a tall, unassuming figure who moved with a quiet confidence. There was no pretense, no peacocking. He was just Julian. She stayed in the library for another hour, but she wasn't sketching anymore. She was replaying their conversation, the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd made her feel seen. A tiny seed of hope had been planted in the barren soil of her heart. It had nothing to do with revenge or getting over Liam. It had everything to do with the possibility of becoming Marie again. As she packed up her sketchbook, she felt a lightness she hadn't felt since before the divorce. The echo of Liam's perfect life was still there, but for the first time she could hear another sound beginning to rise, the quiet, hopeful melody of her own. The date with Julian was better than she could have imagined. They spent 4 hours at the gallery, not just looking at the paintings, but truly seeing them. He would point out the subtle color transitions in a Mark Rothko canvas, and she would explain the emotional theory behind them. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like the most interesting person in the world. Afterwards, they went to a small, unassuming Italian restaurant he knew, tucked away on a side street, where the owner greeted him by name. Over pasta and red wine, she learned more about him. He ran a small tech company, as he put it. He spoke passionately about data ethics and creating user-centric software. He was intelligent, witty, and profoundly decent. There were no red flags, no hints of the arrogance she'd grown so accustomed to with Liam. He asked about her job, and when she described the soul-crushing corporate work, he didn't pity her. He said, "It sounds like a temporary stop. Someone with your eye can't be happy designing insurance pamphlets forever." He made her feel like her dreams were not just valid, but inevitable. Their second date led to a third and then a fourth. Within a month, Julian had become a steady, comforting presence in her life. He encouraged her to start a portfolio of her personal work, the intricate, nature-inspired illustrations that she truly loved. He even bought her a professional-grade tablet to help her transition into digital art. An investment in a brilliant artist. He'd called it brushing off her protests. She was starting to feel whole again. The obsessive checking of Liam's social media had dwindled to nothing. She was too busy living her own life to be a spectator in his. Then came the collision. Julian had booked a reservation for their 1-month anniversary at Aria, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It was the kind of place with a 6-month waiting list, a place Liam had always talked about but could never get into. She felt a pang of nervousness as she dressed, choosing a simple but elegant emerald green dress. Julian had told her to wear whatever made her feel beautiful. When she met him there, he looked devastatingly handsome in a tailored navy blue suit. The way he looked at her when she walked in made her feel like a queen. The restaurant was stunning, all dark wood, soft lighting, and hushed conversations. They were led to a discreet corner booth. They were halfway through their appetizers, laughing about a story from his college days, when she felt a sudden chill. She glanced up, and her blood ran cold. Standing by the host stand, waiting to be seated, were Liam and Isabella. Of course. This was exactly the kind of place they would be. It was a stage, and they were the lead actors in their grand performance of success. Isabella was wearing a stark white dress that looked like it was sculpted onto her body, a stark contrast to her softer green. She held her head high, surveying the room with an air of ownership. Liam stood beside her, his hand possessively on the small of her back, a smug look on his face. For a moment she wanted to slide under the table. The old insecurities came rushing back, a tidal wave of inadequacy. Her stomach twisted. Julian must have sensed the change in her instantly. "Marie, are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. She couldn't speak. She could only nod numbly towards the entrance. He followed her gaze. He looked at Liam and Isabella, then back at her. His expression was unreadable, but his hand found hers across the table, his thumb stroking her knuckles reassuringly. Then Liam's eyes swept the room and locked with hers. His smug smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of pure shock. It was followed by confusion, and then something else. Something she couldn't quite decipher. Annoyance? Curiosity. He saw her then, his eyes slid to Julian, taking in his expensive suit and the effortless confidence with which he occupied this space. Isabella noticed Liam's distraction and followed his line of sight. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. A cool, dismissive smile played on her lips as she looked Marie up and down, her gaze lingering for a moment on her dress, which suddenly felt cheap and unsophisticated. They were seated across the room, but in a direct line of sight. The dinner, which had been so warm and intimate, was now charged with an unbearable tension. She could feel their eyes on them. She tried to focus on Julian, on his voice, but she was hyper-aware of every move they made. After a few minutes, Liam did something she never would have expected. He stood up and started walking towards their table. "Don't let him ruin our evening," Julian said softly, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "You have nothing to prove to him." Liam arrived at their table, a practiced, charming smile plastered on his face. "Marie, fancy seeing you here. The world is a small place." "Liam?" she said, her voice tight. His eyes flicked to Julian, an unspoken challenge in them. "You must be Marie's new friend." He said the word friend, dripping with condescension. Julian stood up, a gesture of polite respect that somehow also asserted his dominance. He was a few inches taller than Liam, his presence calmer, but infinitely more formidable. "I'm Julian Croft. It's a pleasure." He offered a hand. Liam shook it, his grip a little too firm. "Liam Sterling. I'm Marie's ex-husband." He said it as if it were a title, a claim of ownership. Isabella had now glided over to join him, a vision of icy perfection. "Darling, don't bother them," she said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. She gave Marie a saccharine smile. "It's so good to see you out and about, Marie. We were worried about you." The insinuation was clear, the poor pathetic ex-wife finally managing to crawl out of her lonely apartment. The rage that simmered inside her was so hot it was almost dizzying. Before she could say anything, Julian spoke, his tone even and cool. "That's very thoughtful of you, but as you can see, she's doing wonderfully." He looked at her, his eyes full of warmth and pride, a stark contrast to the pitying glances she was receiving from the other two. The interaction lasted less than a minute, but it felt like an eternity. They finally retreated to their table, but the damage was done. Her appetite was gone. She felt exposed, judged, and thrown right back into the box Liam had built for her. She looked at Julian, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Julian. This is ruined." He shook his head, his expression firm. "Absolutely not. They don't have that power, Marie. Look at me." She met his gaze. "You are the most captivating woman in this room. They are the past. I am your present. Let's not give them another second of our time." He signaled for the waiter, ordered a bottle of their finest champagne, and proceeded to tell her a funny, self-deprecating story about his first failed business venture. He didn't mention Liam or Isabella again. He slowly, masterfully pulled her back from the brink, rebuilding the intimate world they had shattered. But as they left the restaurant hours later, she saw them watching them go. Isabella's face was a mask of polite indifference, but she saw the flicker of something sharp and venomous in her eyes. Liam just looked confused, as if he was seeing a puzzle he couldn't solve. The perfect narrative he had built for his life suddenly had an unexpected variable, and he clearly didn't know what to make of it. The incident at Aria left a strange aftertaste. On one hand, it was humiliating. On the other, Julian's unwavering support had solidified something between them. He hadn't flinched. He had shielded her. It was a kind of partnership she had craved with Liam but never truly received. A few weeks later, Julian approached her with a hesitant look in his eye. "I have a favor to ask, and please feel free to say no," he began. "My company is the primary sponsor for the annual Children's Literacy Gala. It's a big event, very public, and I would be honored if you would accompany me." Her heart leaped into her throat. A public event, cameras, society pages. It was everything she normally avoided. But the thought of standing by Julian's side, not as a background player, but as his chosen partner, was a powerful lure. "I'd love to," she heard herself say, a new wave of confidence washing over her. The preparations were a whirlwind. Julian insisted on taking care of everything. A stylist he knew, a chic, kind woman named Anja, arrived at her apartment with a rack of breathtaking gowns. She chose a deep sapphire blue creation that shimmered under the light with an elegant cut that made her feel both powerful and feminine. Anja arranged for a hair and makeup artist on the day of the gala. When she was finally ready, she stared at the woman in the mirror. It was her, but it was a version of her she hadn't seen in a decade. The defeated slump was gone from her shoulders. Her eyes, expertly framed, shone with anticipation, not sadness. For the first time, she didn't feel like Marie Sterling's ghost. She felt like Marie Cutrona. Julian's driver picked her up in a sleek black town car. When she arrived at the grand ballroom of the Regent Hotel, Julian was waiting for her just inside the entrance. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, and when he saw her, he actually stopped breathing for a second. "Marie," he whispered, his voice thick with awe, "you are absolutely breathtaking." He took her hand and brought it to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. In that moment, she felt more cherished than she had in her entire 10-year marriage to Liam. As they entered the ballroom, she finally began to grasp the scale of Julian's life. His small tech company was in fact Nexus Innovations, a global leader in AI and data security. His name wasn't just on the sponsor list, it was on the main banner hanging over the stage. Julian Croft, CEO and founder. People turned as they walked in. Whispers followed them. He wasn't just a guest. He was the gravitational center of the room. Mayors, senators, and rival tech billionaires came over to shake his hand, and he introduced her to each of them with quiet pride. "This is Marie Cutrona." She was nervous, but Julian was a masterful guide, keeping her close, drawing her into conversations, and making her feel completely at ease. She spoke to a city councilwoman about public art initiatives and debated classic literature with a famous novelist. She was holding her own. She was thriving. And then she saw them. Across the room near the silent auction table stood Liam and Isabella. They weren't just guests. They were clearly on the hunt, trying to network their way up the social ladder. Liam was in a rental-looking tuxedo, and Isabella was in a dress that, while expensive, seemed to be trying too hard with its sequins and high slit. They were scanning the crowd, their expressions hungry. Liam saw them first. He froze mid-sentence with some minor executive he was trying to impress. His drink nearly slipped from his hand. He nudged Isabella, who followed his gaze. Her jaw didn't drop. Her composure was too perfect for that. But something more telling happened. The practiced, serene smile she wore vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. The mask slipped. For a split second, she saw raw, unadulterated shock and a flash of pure, venomous envy. They watched as the mayor of the city clapped Julian on the back. They watched as a photographer from Vogue approached them and asked for a picture. Julian wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Is this okay?" he murmured. She nodded and they smiled for the camera as the flashbulb popped. That flashbulb was like a starting pistol. The story of the night had just been written. It wasn't about the fundraising goal or the keynote speaker. It was about the unexpected couple tech titan Julian Croft and his stunning, mysterious date. The rest of the evening was a surreal blur. Liam and Isabella tried to pretend they weren't watching them, but she could feel their eyes burning into her back. She saw Isabella force a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She saw Liam checking his phone, his jaw tight. They were in the same room, but they were in different universes. He had spent years chasing entry into this world, the world of power and influence. And here she was, not just in it, but at its very center, on the arm of a man who didn't just attend the party, he threw it. Later, as Julian was making a gracious and eloquent speech on stage, she scanned the crowd. Her eyes found Liam. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was looking at her. The condescension from the restaurant was gone. The smugness was gone. His face was a complex canvas of confusion, regret, and something that looked terrifyingly like longing. It was the look of a man who had meticulously built a house of cards only to watch a hurricane named Marie Catrona walk into the room. As they left the gala hand in hand, stepping past the velvet ropes into the cool night air, she felt a profound shift in the cosmos. She hadn't sought revenge. She hadn't planned any of this. She had simply started living her own life, and in doing so, she had inadvertently stolen the spotlight they so desperately craved. The perfect facade of Liam and Isabella Sterling to-be had just developed its first undeniable crack. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones it was just the beginning. The morning after the gala, the world was different. Her name was no longer just a name. It was attached to Julian Croft's. The society columns and online gossip sites were buzzing. Tech mogul Julian Croft debuts new love at annual charity gala. There were photos of them everywhere, smiling at the camera, laughing together, his hand resting possessively on her waist. She was no longer the mystery woman. She was Marie Catrona, and suddenly people were interested in who she was. An arts and culture blog dug up the personal portfolio website Julian had encouraged her to create. They ran a feature, More Than a Mogul's Muse, The Stunning Art of Marie Catrona. Within 48 hours, her website traffic exploded. She received emails from galleries, inquiries about commissions, and even an offer from a boutique publisher to illustrate a collection of classic fairy tales. It was a dizzying, terrifying, and exhilarating avalanche of opportunity. Julian was her anchor through it all. "I told you they'd see it," he said, his smile genuine and proud. "This is all you, Marie, your talent. I just opened a door. You're the one flying through it." He helped her navigate the offers, connecting her with a lawyer and an agent to ensure she was making smart decisions. With his guidance, she didn't just feel like an artist. She felt like a business owner. She quit her job at the insurance company, a moment of liberation so sweet it brought tears to her eyes. While her world was expanding, Liam and Isabella's was visibly shrinking. The first call from Liam came 3 days after the gala. She was sketching at her kitchen table, the morning sun streaming in, when his name flashed on her screen. She almost didn't answer, but a morbid curiosity won. "Marie," his voice was strained. "Hi, Liam." I saw the articles, all the photos," he stammered. "Croft, Julian Croft, the CEO of Nexus. How do you even know him?" There was an accusatory tone in his voice, as if she had somehow cheated. "We met," she said simply, offering no details. "This is insane," he continued, his voice rising. "You have to be careful, Marie. A guy like that, they live in a different world. They use people. He's probably just with you for the novelty of it. The quiet, artsy type. It's a cliché." The audacity of his concern was breathtaking. He wasn't worried about her. He was trying to tear down what she had to make himself feel better. I appreciate your sudden concern for my welfare, Liam. But I'm fine, she said, her voice cold. I have to go. I'm working on a commission. She hung up before he could respond, her hand trembling slightly, not with fear, but with rage. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand that she had found happiness, and not just any happiness, but a life that dwarfed the one he was so proud of. Isabella's reaction was more public, and in a way more pathetic. Her Instagram went into overdrive. She posted a relentless stream of content celebrating her and Liam's perfect love. A long gushing post about their wedding planning with the hashtag Sterling Empire. A series of professionally shot photos of them laughing on a sailboat captioned, "Find someone who is your anchor in any storm." It was all so performative, so desperate. She was shouting into the void, trying to convince the world and perhaps herself that her prize was still the best one. The comments on her posts started to change. Where there used to be fawning praise, there were now subtle jabs. Almost as glamorous as the literacy gala, one person wrote under a photo of their engagement party. Liam's ex is dating Julian Croft, you know. Another commented. She would delete them, but more would pop up. The story was out, and her curated narrative was losing its power. The real shift came during a lunch with Chloe. They were at an outdoor cafe when she slid her phone across the table. "You need to see this." It was a post from a well-known local gossip columnist. The headline read, "Sterling Thorne wedding plans hit a snag, fiancé's ex moves on and up." The article detailed Liam's modest career in finance compared to Julian's stratospheric success. It painted Isabella as a driven but local player, while Marie was now being linked to global philanthropy and the tech elite. The most damning line was near the end. One has to wonder if Mr. Sterling is having second thoughts. It seems the woman he deemed too comfortable has found a life that is anything but. "Ouch," Chloe said, sipping her iced tea. "That's got to sting." It was brutal, and a part of her, the part that had cried on her apartment floor, felt a grim sense of satisfaction. But it was fleeting. Her happiness with Julian, her burgeoning career that was real. Their drama was just noise, a fading echo from a life she no longer lived. A few weeks later, she got a frantic, tearful call from an old mutual friend, Jessica, who was one of Isabella's bridesmaids. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered into the phone, "but they are fighting. All the time. Liam is obsessed. He is constantly talking about you, about Croft. He checks the news, the blogs. Isabella is losing her mind. She threw a $5,000 vase at the wall last night. She keeps saying you're doing this to ruin her life." The perfect couple was imploding. The empire was crumbling before it was even built. The pressure of maintaining the facade, now that it had a glaring point of comparison, was proving to be too much. Liam hadn't just been content to have the better life. He needed everyone to know it. Now, by every conceivable public metric, he didn't. And it was destroying them. Her quiet success had become their public failure. The wedding was 6 weeks away. According to the society pages that were now, ironically, her source of information on her ex-husband's life, the Sterling Thorne wedding was set to be the event of the season. Isabella had booked the most prestigious country club, hired a celebrity wedding planner, and had reportedly commissioned a custom gown from a famous designer. It was a full-scale production designed to scream success and perfection from the rooftops. But behind the scenes, the cracks were turning into chasms. Liam's attempts to contact her grew more frequent and more desperate. He sent texts late at night. "Are you happy? And he doesn't know you like I do." She ignored them all, blocking his number after he sent a rambling, wine-fueled email reminiscing about their simple, real life together. Her life with Julian was anything but simple, yet it was more real than anything she'd known. They traveled. He took her to a conference in Kyoto where they spent their free time exploring ancient temples. They spent a weekend at his quiet modern cabin by a lake where they talked for hours, and she filled a sketchbook with drawings of the landscape. He celebrated every one of her successes. When she signed the contract to illustrate the fairy tale collection, he opened a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon and toasted to the brilliant Marie Cutrona, who is finally showing the world what I saw in the library that day. He never once asked about Liam. He never made her feel like she had baggage. He simply loved her for who she was right now. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, her doorman buzzed. "Mr. Cutrona is here to see you." "I'm sorry, who?" "He says he's your brother, Mr. Sterling." Her blood turned to ice. Liam. He had lied to get past security. "Do not let him up," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "He's already on his way up, Ms. Cutrona. He rushed past me." A moment later, there was a frantic pounding on her apartment door. "Marie, please, we need to talk, just for 5 minutes." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought about calling security, about calling Julian. But another part of her, a part that needed closure, wanted to face this head on. She took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and opened the door. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suit was rumpled. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, wild-eyed desperation. "What do you want, Liam?" she asked, her voice as steady as she could make it, blocking the doorway with her body. I needed to see you," he said, his eyes scanning her apartment, which was now filled with art supplies, proofs for her book, and a beautiful bouquet of lilies Julian had sent that morning. "This whole thing, it's a sham." "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "This," he gestured wildly. "Her. The wedding. Isabella. It's all for show. It's a performance, Marie. Every single day. We talk about brand synergy and our 5-year plan. We don't talk about us. There is no us. It's just a merger." She stared at him unmoved. "You chose this life, Liam. You told me it was what you always wanted. An empire, remember." "I was an idiot," he burst out, his voice cracking. "I was a fool who didn't know what he had. I had a real life with you, a real partnership. I threw it away for this, for a woman who checks her stock portfolio before she kisses me good morning, a woman who is more concerned with the guest list than with me." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I made a mistake, Marie, a terrible, life-ruining mistake. She isn't perfect. She's hollow. And seeing you happy, successful, seeing you with him, it just made me realize what I lost." It was the confession she had once dreamed of hearing, the ultimate validation. But hearing it now, she felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. He hadn't come here because he loved her. He had come here because his new toy was broken, and her new life made his look cheap. Her happiness was a mirror reflecting his own failure, and he couldn't stand the sight of it. "There's nothing left to say, Liam," she said quietly. "You made your choice. I've made mine." "No, don't say that," he whispered, reaching for her. He tried to cup her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheek. The gesture, once so familiar, felt alien and repulsive. In his eyes she saw the ghost of the man she once loved, now twisted by envy and regret. "We can fix this. It's not too late. Call off the wedding. I'll leave her tonight. We can go back." "Go back to what?" she said, pulling away, her voice finally rising. "To the woman you thought was too small for you. The woman you left because she wasn't ambitious enough. You don't want me, Liam. You want what I have. You can't stand that I built a better life after you burned ours to the ground. You're not in love with me. You're in love with the idea of winning." His face crumpled. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He saw it then, his own pathetic, ego-driven heart laid bare. He tried one last desperate gambit. He lunged forward and tried to kiss her. She turned her head and his lips met her cheek. She pushed him back hard. "Get out," she hissed, her voice trembling with a final cleansing rage. "Get out of my home and out of my life. For good." He stumbled back defeated. The last of his fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving an empty, pathetic shell. He gave her one last haunted look and then turned and walked away. His shoulders slumped. She shut the door, locked it, and leaned against it, her body shaking. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was the definitive final closing of a chapter. He hadn't just been her ex-husband. He had been a ghost haunting her every step, and she had finally decisively exorcised him. The last cord had been cut. She was completely and utterly free. The day of Liam and Isabella's wedding arrived on the wings of a brilliantly sunny, crisp autumn Saturday. It was the kind of day photographers dream of, where the light is golden and the sky is an impossible cloudless blue. Her phone, which she'd intentionally left on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a relentless rhythm. She knew without looking that it was the digital world announcing the nuptials. Curiosity, that old familiar ghost, finally beckoned her over. Her social media feeds were an inescapable shrine to the Sterling Thorn union. A prominent lifestyle magazine granted exclusive access was flooding the internet with a meticulously curated play-by-play. The first image was a drone shot of the Oak Ridge Country Club, its manicured lawns sprawling like a green carpet, the grand white clubhouse looking like a modern-day palace. Then came the detail shots, a towering ice sculpture of their intertwined initials, L and I, already beginning to weep in the sun. The 10-tier wedding cake, a monument of white fondant and sugar flowers. Close-ups of the calligraphed menus and the champagne flutes, each etched with the wedding date. And then there was Isabella. A series of photos showed her in her custom gown, a severe architectural creation that was more of a statement than a celebration. She looked flawless, her raven hair pulled back into a chignon so tight it seemed painful, her makeup a mask of perfection. But in every photograph, even the ones where she was smiling, her eyes held a brittle, high-stakes tension. She was a CEO closing the most important deal of her life. Finally, a photo of the happy couple moments after the ceremony. They stood under a massive arch of white roses, Liam in his bespoke tuxedo, Isabella holding his arm. They were smiling for the camera, a perfectly composed portrait of success. But she saw what the camera tried to hide. She saw the faint, tight line of Liam's jaw, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked less like a groom and more like a man who had just signed a contract with punishingly high terms. They were a picture of perfection, but the picture was hollow. There was no joy in it, only the grim satisfaction of an objective achieved. A strange sort of peace settled over her as she set the phone back down. There was no sting of jealousy, no pang of regret. There was only the quiet clinical observation of a life she had so thoroughly and gratefully escaped. Just then the doorbell rang. It was Julian, dressed not in a suit but in comfortable jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled at her. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked. He didn't know the date's significance to her past, and she felt a surge of gratitude for that. To him it was just a beautiful Saturday, a day for them. He led her not to his sleek town car, but to a beautifully restored vintage Land Rover, its forest green paint gleaming in the sun. As they drove, leaving the city and its digital noise in the rearview mirror, a tangible sense of relief washed over her. The further they went, the more the concrete towers gave way to rolling hills painted in the fiery colors of fall. They didn't listen to the radio. They just talked about her book illustrations, about a funny problem his programmers were trying to solve, about the simple, profound joy of a perfect cup of coffee. It was effortless. It was real. 2 hours later, they pulled up to the trailhead of a path she knew by heart. It was where he had taken her for their first real date outside the city, a quiet, winding trail that he loved. They'd hiked for miles that day, talking about everything and nothing, and she had felt the first true thaw of the ice that had encased her heart for so long. Now they began the ascent again, their steps falling into an easy, familiar rhythm. The air was clean and scented with pine and damp earth, a world away from the cloying perfume of 1,000 white roses. They walked mostly in a comfortable silence, their hands intertwined. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a small, constant reassurance. This was their ceremony, their sacred space. When they finally reached the lookout point, the view stole her breath just as it had the first time. The entire valley stretched out below them, a breathtaking tapestry of red gold and deep orange, the sun casting long shadows that shifted and danced. They sat on a large flat rock warmed by the afternoon sun, the same one they'd sat on months ago. For a few minutes they just watched the world quiet and still. Then Julian turned to her, his expression shifting, his gaze becoming more intense. His hazel eyes were serious, but they held a universe of deep, unwavering affection. "Marie," he began, his voice a little thicker than usual. "I have stood on stages and spoken to thousands of people. I have sat in boardrooms where the fate of billion-dollar deals rested on my next word. But I have to tell you, I have never in my life been as nervous as I am right at this moment." He took both of her hands in his grip warm and firm. "The first time I saw you in that dusty corner of the library, you were so completely lost in your art that the rest of the world had simply ceased to exist for you. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and as I've gotten to know you, I've realized that's the essence of who you are. You see the truth and the beauty in things, and you have this incredible gift for capturing it. And somewhere along the way, you captured me, completely and irrevocably." Her heart was no longer beating, it was soaring. She could feel tears welling in her eyes, blurring the spectacular view into a kaleidoscope of autumn color. "I don't have a picturesque cliffside in Positano," he continued, a small self-deprecating smile on his lips. "And I didn't hire a photographer to hide in the bushes. All I have is this place which feels like ours, and I have a question I've been wanting to ask you for a very long time." He released one of her hands and reached into the pocket of his jacket, pulling out a small, unassuming velvet box. Her breath caught in her throat. He opened it, and her tears finally spilled over. Inside was not the monstrous, blinding diamond that screamed for attention from Isabella's finger. It was a stunning antique-style ring, intricate and unique. A deep blue sapphire, her favorite stone, a color he remembered her admiring in a painting, once rested between two small, sparkling, ethically sourced diamonds on a hand-carved platinum band that looked like intertwined vines. It was a work of art. It was perfectly, wonderfully her. "Marie Catrona," he said, his voice now thick with emotion, his gaze locked with hers. "You are the most brilliant, kind, compassionate, and resilient person I have ever known. You didn't just let me into your life. You taught me what a real partnership is supposed to feel like. Will you marry me?" The word came out on a sob, a whisper of pure, unadulterated joy. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice choked. "Yes, of course, yes." He let out a shaky breath of relief and slid the ring under her finger. It fit as if it were forged for her. He drew her in and kissed her, a long, deep kiss filled with promises, with relief, and with the profound, grounding sense of coming home. In that moment, with no audience but the vast sky and the silent ancient trees, she felt richer than she could ever have imagined. Later that evening they were curled up on the sofa in her apartment, which now felt definitively like their apartment. They had ordered pizza, their favorite kind, with extra garlic, and were drinking champagne not from delicate flutes but from regular water glasses. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a notification for the magazine article now published, "A Sterling Affair Inside the Society Wedding of the Year." She tapped on it. The gallery was filled with dozens of glossy, hyper-perfect photographs. Liam and Isabella cutting the cake with a ceremonial saber. Liam and Isabella in a painfully staged embrace on the dance floor. Liam and Isabella smiling, always smiling for the unseen audience. Then she closed the article and opened her own camera roll. There was only one new picture from today. It was a selfie Julian had insisted they take at the Lookout after she'd said yes. It was messy and imperfect. Her hair was windblown, her cheeks were flushed from the hike, and her eyes were still puffy from happy tears. Julian was grinning, a genuine, uninhibited grin that lit up his whole face. And there on her hand, which rested on his chest, her beautiful, unique sapphire ring caught the afternoon light. She looked at their gallery of sterile perfection, then back at their single, blurry, joyful image. The contrast was so stark, it was almost laughable. Liam had chased his empire, and he had finally gotten it a wedding that was a media event, a wife who was a strategic partner, a life that was a performance. It was a victory measured in headlines and guest lists. She had simply turned her back on all of that and chased her own quiet happiness. And in doing so, she had found a kingdom. Her victory wasn't loud. It wasn't about revenge or stealing a spotlight. It was the quiet, profound, and undeniable truth that settled in her soul as she leaned her head on her future husband's shoulder. Some people spend their entire lives building a beautiful facade for the world to admire, while the lucky ones get to build a real messy, breathtaking life hidden in plain sight. And so Marie's story isn't really about an ex-wife stealing the spotlight. It's about a woman who stopped looking at the spotlight altogether and created her own light so bright and so authentic that others couldn't help but be drawn to it. It teaches us a powerful lesson. Your value is never determined by the person who leaves you. True success isn't about proving your worth to someone from your past. It's about building a future where they no longer matter. Marie's journey from a heartbroken ghost in her own life to the architect of a beautiful new one is a testament to the power of self-worth and the idea that the best revenge is and always will be a life well lived. What did you think of Marie's incredible transformation? Have you ever seen someone's life take a turn that left everyone speechless? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories about justice, resilience, and getting the last laugh, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life drama.
What happens when a man's final cruel prophecy is shattered in the most spectacular way imaginable? For Emma Vance, the final words her celebrity ex-husband, Julian Thorne, ever spoke to her were a curse. "You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. You will die alone." He said it with the smug certainty of a man who believed he had authored her entire existence. But what Julian didn't count on, what the world couldn't have predicted, was that the universe had a flair for irony. Less than 12 hours later, Emma Vance wouldn't just be fine. She'd be on the front page of every major news outlet, her name a global trending topic, all because of a single candid photograph, her hand held gently, securely in the hand of the world's most enigmatic and untouchable billionaire. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about what happens the morning after your world ends. The air in the penthouse was cold. It wasn't the fault of the climate control, a state-of-the-art system Julian Thorne had often boasted about in interviews for architectural magazines. It was a frigid, soul-deep cold that emanated from the man himself. Julian, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile engineered for talk show sofas, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking down at the sparkling expanse of New York City as if he owned it. In many ways, he thought he did. "It's all signed Emma," he said, not turning to look at her. His voice, the same one that calmed millions of his followers with platitudes about unlocking your inner power, was now clipped and sharp, a shard of glass. Emma Vance clutched the pen in her hand, her knuckles white. The final divorce paper sat on the vast marble island in the kitchen, a kitchen she had designed from the veining in the stone to the specific shade of brushed brass on the handles. It was a space meant for warmth, for laughter, for the life she thought they were building. Now, it was just a stage for her public execution. "I know, Julian," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. She hadn't slept in days. For 10 years, she had been Mrs. Thorne, the quiet, supportive wife of the self-help magnate Julian Thorne, author of the global bestseller, The Architect of You. She had been the one who edited his manuscripts until 3 in the morning, who fact-checked his research, who coached him through his anxieties before every major speech. She had sacrificed her own burgeoning career as an academic, specializing in Renaissance art, to build his empire, believing his success was their success. The cracks had started as hairline fractures. His casual dismissal of her opinions, his gaslighting her memories of events, the way he'd subtly mock her in front of their influential friends. Then came the affairs which he'd explained away as the unfortunate but necessary burdens of a man of his stature. The final break came when she discovered he wasn't just having an affair. He had a long-term partner, a younger, more malleable version of herself already installed in a condo he'd bought downtown. Good. He finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her with disdain. She wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to his tailored Zegna suit. She felt like a ghost in her own home. The movers will be here tomorrow for my remaining effects. Your things? Well, you don't have much, do you? I'll have them put in storage. You have 30 days to collect them. Every word was a calculated blow. He knew her things were mostly books, research papers, and sentimental items from her family, things that held no monetary value to him. "Where am I supposed to go, Julian?" She asked the question, tasting like ash. The penthouse was in his name. The bank accounts had been systematically drained into trusts she couldn't access. Her lawyer, a timid man overwhelmed by Julian's legal Rottweilers, had managed to secure her a settlement that was, in Julian's world, pocket change. It was enough to live on for a year, maybe two, if she was frugal. It was an insult disguised as a severance package. He smirked, a cruel twisting of the lips that never reached his televised eyes. "I don't know, Emma. That's your problem now, isn't it? You wanted to be independent. So be independent." He walked over to the island, picking up his pristine leather briefcase. He didn't even glance at her. He was already moving on. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. "I will." Her defiance seemed to amuse him. He paused at the door, turning back for one final devastating volley. His face was a mask of mock pity. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," he said, his voice dropping into the intimate conspiratorial tone he used on his podcasts. "You poured everything into me. You have no career, no connections of your own. You're, 36? Past your prime, darling. The world is a brutal place for women like you." He stepped closer, his expensive cologne suffocating her. He leaned in his voice, a venomous whisper in her ear. "Let me give you one last piece of free advice, my dear ex-wife. No one will ever want you. You're nothing without me. You carry the stench of failure. Men of quality, men of substance, they want a winner. They don't want someone's discarded leftovers. You will die alone." He pulled back, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He had delivered his curse. It was the final brick in the wall he had built around her heart. And then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous empty space. For a long moment, Emma didn't move. She just stood there, his words slithering into the cracks of her broken confidence. "No one will ever want you. You will die alone." She finally let out a ragged sob, collapsing against the cold marble. The city lights outside blurred into a cruel, glittering mockery. Julian was right. She had given him her youth, her intellect, her loyalty. And in return, he had taken her name, her home, her future, and left her with nothing but a curse ringing in her ears. In that moment, sitting alone in the ruins of her life, she believed him. The next few weeks were a blur of beige. Beige boxes, beige walls of a tiny third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, and a beige, flavorless existence. Emma had found the apartment in a daze. It was all she could afford. The grand views of Central Park were replaced by a view of a brick wall and a perpetually overflowing dumpster. The scent of fresh orchids Julian insisted on was replaced by the smell of damp old wood and her neighbor's cooking. She unpacked the few boxes Julian's men hadn't accidentally misplaced. Her books, her precious companions, filled makeshift shelves. Her research notes on the artist Artemisia Gentileschi, a female painter who had triumphed over immense personal violation and patriarchal oppression, felt like a cruel joke. Emma had once dreamed of writing the definitive book on her. Now she could barely summon the energy to read the titles. Julian's curse echoed in the cramped space. "No one will ever want you." It became the soundtrack to her lonely nights. She'd scroll through social media, a masochistic ritual. Julian was thriving. He was photographed with A-list actors giving talks at prestigious conferences, and his new girlfriend, a model named Crystal, was splashed across his Instagram, always laughing, always perfect. He had already rewritten their history, painting himself as the patient husband who had finally freed himself from a negative and uninspiring partner. His followers lapped it up, flooding his comments with praise for his strength and authenticity. Emma's only lifeline was Chloe Davies. Chloe, a sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal art gallery owner, had been her friend since college. She'd never liked Julian, calling him a self-help vampire who drains the life out of everyone and sells it back to them in a paperback. Chloe showed up one Friday evening, armed with 2 bottles of expensive wine and a container of pad thai. She took one look at the apartment, and Emma's gaunt face and her expression hardened. "Okay, that's it," Chloe declared, setting the food on a wobbly IKEA table. "The moping is officially over. Operation Phoenix begins now." Emma gave a weak smile. "I don't feel much like a mythical bird, Chloe. More like a pigeon with a broken wing." "Nonsense," Chloe said, pouring a generous glass of Sancerre. "You are Emma Vance. You can spot a forged Botticelli from 20 paces, and you can recite Vasari's Lives of the Artists backwards. That sociopath didn't give you your brain. He just tried to convince you not to use it. We just need to remind you who you are." Chloe talked for hours, her voice filling the quiet apartment with life. She spoke of new artists, of gallery openings, of the vibrant world that Emma had been cut off from. Slowly, tentatively, Emma found herself correcting a point Chloe made about the use of lapis lazuli in the Scrovegni chapel, the old fire of her intellect flickering faintly. "See, she's still in there," Chloe said, pointing at her with a shrimp-laden fork. "Now for the main event." She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. The calligraphy was elegant. "What's this?" Emma asked. "This," Chloe said with a flourish, "is your re-entry into the world. It's the St. Jude's Foundation Annual Benefit Gala, the biggest art world event of the fall. They're auctioning off a recently discovered Degas sketch. Everyone who is anyone will be there." Emma recoiled as if the envelope were on fire. "Chloe, no, I can't. What would I wear? Who would I talk to? Julian will be there. He's a patron." "First," Chloe said, ticking the points off on her fingers, "I have a friend at Marchesa who owes me a colossal favor. You will be dressed in a gown that will make angels weep. Second, you will talk to me. And third, screw Julian. Seeing you there looking magnificent and not giving a damn about him will be like a stake through his narcissistic heart. It's the perfect revenge." "I don't want revenge, Chloe. I just want to be invisible." "Too bad," Chloe countered. "Invisibility is cancelled. You've spent a decade in the shadows. It's time to stand in the light. Not for him, not for anyone else. For you. Remember the woman who wanted to write the Gentileschi book? The one who was passionate and brilliant? She wouldn't hide from a bully in a bespoke suit. She'd face him. Emma looked at the invitation. The St. Jude's Foundation. The very name felt like a sign. She thought of Julian's parting words, the poison of his curse. You will die alone. Maybe he was right. Or maybe, just maybe, Chloe was. Maybe the only way to break a curse was to defy it. She took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached the bottom of her lungs in months. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. Okay, I'll go. Chloe's smile was triumphant. That's my girl. Now let's finish this wine. We have a phoenix to raise from the ashes. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and even more glittering people. The air hummed with the low thrum of powerful conversations, scented with expensive perfume and ambition. Emma felt a wave of vertigo. For years, she had navigated these events at Julian's side, a silent accessory. Tonight, she was on her own, and it was terrifying. Chloe, true to her word, had worked magic. The Marchesa gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that shimmered with every movement. It was elegant, understated, and fit her as if it were spun just for her. Her hair was swept up in a loose romantic chignon, and for the first time in a long time, the woman staring back at her from the reflection in a champagne flute looked not like a victim, but like herself. "Stop hiding behind the ficus," Chloe hissed, pulling her gently by the arm. "You look like a goddess. Own it." They circulated Chloe, greeting people with air kisses and sharp witticisms. Emma managed a few polite smiles, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She kept scanning the crowd for Julian, a primal sense of dread coiling in her stomach. The auction began. The auctioneer, a man with a plummy British accent and a theatrical flair, charmed the room into parting with extraordinary sums of money for art vacations and experiences. Emma found herself genuinely captivated by the art, her professional eye assessing the works, her mind momentarily distracted from her anxiety. The main event was the Degas sketch, a delicate, intimate drawing of a ballerina tying her shoe. Bidding was fierce, paddles shooting up across the room. Emma watched mesmerized when she saw him. Julian. He was sitting at a prominent front table, his arm possessively around Crystal's chair, his paddle held high. He wanted the Degas. Of course he did. It was a trophy. Emma felt a chill and turned away, needing to escape. "I need some air," she murmured to Chloe, slipping away from their table towards a set of French doors that led to a small, secluded terrace. The cool night air was a balm. The terrace was blessedly empty, overlooking a quiet courtyard garden. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes, trying to will away the image of Julian's smug face. This was a mistake. She wasn't ready. "It's a beautiful piece, isn't it, the Degas?" The voice was deep, calm, and startlingly close. Emma's eyes snapped open. A man was standing a few feet away, half hidden in the shadows, looking not at her, but out at the garden. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but he wore it with a kind of casual indifference, as if it were a second skin. "Yes," Emma found herself saying, her voice a little breathless. His use of line, "It's so economical, but it captures the entire weight and strain of the moment. It's not just a pretty picture." The man turned his head slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his profile in the dim light. Strong jaw, thoughtful eyes, an air of quiet intensity that was the polar opposite of Julian's performative charisma. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. Most people just see the ballerina. He set his gaze now on her. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, like a stormy sea. "You see the work." A blush rose on her cheeks. It was the first time in years anyone had seen her, and not the woman standing next to Julian Thorne. I studied art history. It was my field." Was he asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice? She corrected herself, a spark of her old self igniting. "It is my field." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Good." An awkward, yet not uncomfortable silence fell between them. From inside, they could hear the auctioneer's voice rising to a crescendo. "Sold to Mr. Julian Thorne." Emma flinched, the sound of his name a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold returning. The stranger's perceptive eyes missed nothing. "You know him," he stated. It wasn't a question. She gave a wry, bitter laugh. "He's my ex-husband. The divorce was finalized yesterday." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She instantly regretted it. Why was she dumping her baggage on this handsome stranger? But he didn't recoil or offer empty platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded like he actually meant for the turmoil, not for the divorce itself. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. "It's fine. I should go back inside." "Wait," he said, taking a step closer. The space between them seemed to crackle with an unexpected energy. "My name is Alistair." He extended his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. A jolt, like a static shock, shot up her arm. "Emma," she replied. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma, who sees the work." He held her hand for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. As she turned to walk back inside, her heart doing a strange, unfamiliar flutter, he spoke again, his voice soft. "For what it's worth, he didn't deserve that sketch. He only sees the ballerina." Emma walked back into the ballroom, her mind reeling. She didn't see the rest of the auction. She didn't even notice when Chloe returned to the table. She was consumed by the brief, intense connection with the man on the terrace, Alistair. As the gala wound down, Chloe helped her navigate the exit. They were waiting for their car when a flurry of activity erupted near the main entrance. A swarm of paparazzi, who had been waiting for a politician to leave, suddenly turned their lenses towards the doors. Alistair emerged. And suddenly, Emma understood. The flashes were blinding. Shouts of his name echoed in the night. Alistair Sterling. The Alistair Sterling. The reclusive tech billionaire. The prodigy who had made his fortune in sustainable energy and now ran the Sterling Foundation, one of the world's largest philanthropic organizations. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence here was a major event. He seemed unfazed by the chaos, his expression impassive, as his security team tried to clear a path. His gaze swept the crowd, and for a heart-stopping moment, his eyes met Emma's. There was a flicker of recognition, a ghost of the smile she'd seen on the terrace. Chloe was gaping. "Oh my God, you were talking to Alistair Sterling, the great white whale of the Forbes list." Before Emma could answer, the crowd surged. A clumsy photographer stumbled backward, bumping into Emma and sending her off balance. She gasped, expecting to fall, but a strong hand shot out and caught her arm, steadying her. Another hand instinctively found hers, lacing their fingers together in a firm, protective grip. It was Alistair. He had broken from his security cordon and was suddenly right there, his body shielding hers from the jostling crowd. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned, meant only for her. She could only nod, speechless. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the paparazzi, the shouting, it all faded into a dull hum. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand, the solid presence of him next to her. It lasted only for a few seconds. His security team quickly enveloped them, guiding them towards a waiting black sedan, a car far more imposing than the Uber they had called. He opened the back door, still holding her hand, and looked at her. "Let me give you a ride," he said. It wasn't a request. Dumbly, she nodded again and slid into the plush leather interior. Chloe scrambled in after her, wide-eyed. Alistair followed, and the door shut with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in a cocoon of silence. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights behind. Emma looked down. Her hand was still linked with his. Across the street, hidden in the shadows, a freelance paparazzo, who had missed the main scrum, lowered his camera. He hadn't gotten a clear shot of Sterling's face, but he'd gotten something else, something intimate and intriguing. A close-up of their hands perfectly intertwined, a story in a single frame. He smiled. This was better than a politician. This was gold. Emma woke up to the sound of a hurricane. Not a literal one, but the digital tempest of her phone vibrating violently on her bedside table. It buzzed and chirped with a relentless, frantic energy she'd never experienced before. Groggily, she reached for it, her mind still fuzzy from the surreal events of the previous night. Alistair's driver had dropped her and Chloe off, a polite and formal goodbye hanging in the air. The feeling of his hand in hers lingered like a phantom limb. She squinted at the screen. 347 new text messages, 98 missed calls, a torrent of notifications from Instagram, Twitter, and news apps she didn't even remember installing. Her blood ran cold. This was the kind of attention Julian received, not her. Her thumb trembled as she swiped to open a text from Chloe. It was a string of incoherent capital letters and a link. "Chloe, Emma. Oh my God, holy Sikh, look at this now." With a deep sense of foreboding, she clicked the link. It took her to the homepage of TMZ. And there it was. The lead story. The photograph. It was an artful shot, tightly framed and undeniable. Two hands. Her hand, recognizable by the delicate silver ring her grandmother had left her, was entwined with a man's larger, stronger hand. The cuff of a tuxedo and a sliver of an impossibly expensive-looking watch were visible. The headline screamed, "Mystery Woman, Reclusive Billionaire, Alistair Sterling, in Shockingly Public Romance." She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She scrambled to open other news sites. Page 6. The Daily Mail, Vanity Fair. It was everywhere. The same photo. The same breathless speculation. Who is Alistair Sterling's secret girlfriend, the handhold seen round the world? Sources say the woman is a stunning brunette who spent the evening at the St. Jude's Gala with the tech mogul. She was the mystery woman, the stunning brunette. It felt like she was reading about a character in a novel, not herself. Then her stomach dropped as she saw the comments section. The digital mob was already at work. Sleuths were trying to identify her. And then someone did. A gossip columnist with a long memory posted a picture of her from 3 years ago standing behind Julian at a book launch. The narrative shifted with whiplash speed. Update: Sterling's mystery woman, identified as Emma Vance, ex-wife of self-help guru Julian Thorne. And that's when the second storm hit. Julian's storm. He hadn't waited. He hadn't stayed silent. He had gone on the offensive with brutal surgical precision. He posted a statement on his Instagram, a platform with 20 million followers. It was a masterclass in manipulation, cloaked in his signature brand of faux vulnerability. The post was a picture of him looking pensively out a window, a cup of tea in his hands. The caption began, "Friends, many of you have been asking me about the recent news. It is with a heavy heart that I must address this. As you know, I have recently gone through a painful and private separation. I have tried to handle this with dignity and grace, wishing only the best for Emma. To see these photos today is deeply concerning." Emma felt sick. Concerned, I have always been a supporter of Emma, even as we grew apart. But I fear she is in a vulnerable place right now. To see her latch onto a man of such immense wealth and power so quickly, literally the day after our divorce was finalized, is alarming. I pray that she is not being taken advantage of, and that this is not a cry for help or a desperate attempt to fill a void. I am worried for her well-being. I will be making no further comment on this matter, as I wish to focus on healing. Please send her your positive energy. It was diabolical. In one fell swoop, he had painted her as a mentally unstable, desperate gold digger. He was the concerned, sensitive ex-husband. She was the pathetic, grasping woman. He had co-opted the language of therapy and wellness, a language she had helped him perfect, and turned it into a weapon against her. The comments were a tidal wave of vitriol aimed squarely at her. Wow, she didn't waste any time, did she, gold digger alert? Poor Julian, he's so classy, she's clearly a mess. I knew there was a reason he left her. She sounds like a parasite. Hope Alistair Sterling sees her for what she is. She's just using him for his money. The curse. You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. He was making it come true, not by magic, but by the brute force of public opinion. He was branding her, defining her for the entire world, before she could even speak a word in her own defense. Her tiny apartment felt like it was closing in on her. The brick wall outside was a prison. She curled into a ball on her bed, the phone lying face down on the floor, still buzzing, still spewing poison. The shame was suffocating. He had won. He had utterly, completely destroyed her. She had defied his curse for one night, and in return, he had unleashed hell. The tears she had held back for so long finally came not as a gentle rain, but as a racking, hopeless storm. The knocking was soft at first, then more insistent. Emma ignored it, pulling a pillow over her head to block out the world. It was probably a reporter or a process server with a cease and desist letter from Julian's lawyers for besmirching his good name. "Emma, it's Chloe. Open this door right now, or I'm calling the fire department and telling them I smell gas and a crazy woman with a vintage toaster." Reluctantly, Emma dragged herself to the door and unbolted it. Chloe swept in her face a mixture of fury and concern. She was holding a large bag from a fancy bakery and the morning papers, which she promptly threw in the trash. "Don't read that garbage," she ordered. "I've already seen it. That man is not a human being. He's a sentient, weaponized press release." Chloe took in Emma's tear-streaked face and crumpled form, and her expression softened. "Oh, honey." She enveloped Emma in a hug. "Don't you let him do this to you. Don't you let him win. He already has Chloe," Emma croaked. "Look at what they're saying. The whole world thinks I'm some desperate, grasping social climber. He knew exactly what he was doing." "Of course he did." Chloe said, her voice steely. This is his playbook. Control the narrative, isolate the target, publicly humiliate. He did it to that journalist who wrote a critical profile of him 2 years ago. Remember, he's a predator. Just then, Emma's intercom buzzed, making them both jump. Emma stared at it in terror. "Don't answer it," she whispered. "It could be the pizza I ordered for moral support," Chloe said, trying to lighten the mood. She pressed the button. "Who is it?" A calm, male voice, devoid of static, came through the speaker. "It's Alistair Sterling." "For Emma Vance." Emma and Chloe froze, staring at each other in disbelief. Alistair Sterling. Here, at her third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn. "Let him in," Chloe hissed, suddenly galvanized. "For God's sake, Emma, buzz him in." In a daze, Emma pressed the button. A few moments later, there was a quiet knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find him standing there. He was dressed not in a tuxedo, but in dark jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a lightweight jacket. He looked younger, less intimidating, but the same quiet intensity radiated from him. He was holding a small, unassuming cardboard box. "Miss Vance." "Emma," he said, his gray eyes searching her face. He saw the tear tracks, the fear. His expression wasn't one of pity, but of a kind of grim understanding. "I know this is an intrusion. May I come in?" She could only nod, stepping aside. He walked into her tiny living room, his presence making the space feel both smaller and safer at the same time. He glanced around at the bookshelves, his eyes lingering on the titles. "I came to apologize," he said, turning back to her. "My presence last night and my carelessness brought this circus upon you. I am truly sorry for that." "It's not your fault," Emma said, finding her voice. "It's his. It's my world that has invaded yours." Alistair countered, "And I have some experience with this, which is why I'm here." He placed the box he was carrying on her coffee table. "This is for you." She opened it cautiously. Inside was a sleek silver device. "It's a secure, encrypted satellite phone," he explained. "Untraceable, unhackable. My personal number is the only one programmed into it. Your current phone is a liability. The press can track it. It can be hacked. This is safe." Emma stared at him, bewildered by the practicality and foresight of the gesture. "I also saw his statement." Alistair continued, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "It was a cowardly and calculated attack. He is attempting to define you before you have a chance to define yourself. I will not allow that to happen." Chloe, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway like it was a tennis match, finally spoke up. "Damn right. But how do we fight back? He has 20 million followers who think he's the second coming." Alistair met Chloe's gaze, giving her a nod of respect. "You don't fight him on his battlefield. You don't sling mud. You render his attacks irrelevant by telling the truth, but on your own terms." He looked back at Emma, his focus entirely on her. "He's accused you of being a gold digger. So we show them you have no interest in my money. He's painted you as unstable. So we show them your strength and intelligence." A spark of anger, hot and clean, finally burned through Emma's despair. "He built his entire empire on my work." The words hung in the air. Alistair's expression sharpened. "What do you mean, his book?" Emma said, the story pouring out of her now. "The Architect of You. It was supposed to be my book. My dissertation was on the philosophical concept of the self in Renaissance art, how artists and thinkers of the time constructed their public and private personas. It was about authenticity, legacy, building a life of substance. I had a manuscript, years of research. Julian, he took it. He read it, simplified it, stripped out all the academic nuance and repackaged it with pop psychology buzzwords. He stole my soul and sold it as a self-help guide. Chloe looked horrified. Emma, you never told me it was that direct. I was ashamed, Emma admitted. And he convinced me that no one would ever believe me, that it was our project. Alistair was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. He looked from the pain in Emma's face to the bookshelves crammed with her life's passion. Do you have proof? He asked quietly. Drafts, notes, emails. Emma's heart leaped. Yes, they're in storage, old laptops, boxes of notes. I have everything. Alistair's expression was now one of cold, clear purpose. He was no longer just a handsome stranger or a reclusive billionaire. He was an ally, a powerful one. Then, we have a new plan, he said. We are no longer on the defensive. He wrote that he's concerned about you. Let's give him something to be genuinely concerned about. He looked directly at Emma, and for the first time, she saw not just kindness, but a deep, formidable strength that he was offering to share. He tried to take your voice, Emma. I think it's time the world finally heard it. The next week was a whirlwind of covert operations and quiet strategy orchestrated from Alistair Sterling's minimalist Soho office, a place that felt more like a modern art gallery than a corporate headquarters. There were no reporters outside, no paparazzi. Alistair's world was protected by a level of security and discretion that was an art form in itself. His team, a small group of fiercely loyal and terrifyingly competent individuals, retrieved Emma's boxes from storage. They worked with a forensic IT specialist who recovered every draft, every time-stamped note, every email exchange from her old hard drives. They laid it all out on a large conference table, a mountain of evidence that traced the intellectual genesis of the architect of you directly and unequivocally to Emma. There were her early manuscripts full of complex academic arguments next to Julian's later dumbed-down versions with his handwritten notes in the margins changing her phrasing into marketable sound bites. It was a clear and damning paper trail of intellectual theft. Seeing it all laid out, Emma felt a profound sense of validation, followed by a surge of cold fury. He didn't just steal my words, she said to Alistair, her voice shaking with emotion. He stole my entire thesis on life. And then he used it to lecture the world and me about authenticity. Alistair stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Over the past few days, their alliance had deepened into something more. They'd spent hours talking not just about Julian, but about everything. She learned about his own past with the media, a vicious, untrue story about his family that had made him retreat from public life years ago. He learned about her passion for Artemisia Gentileschi, and he listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel seen and heard in a way she never had with Julian. A quiet, powerful intimacy was growing between them, forged in the crucible of their shared crisis. He won't get away with it, Alistair said, his voice low and resolute. Now, we need to choose our moment. The moment presented itself a few days later. An invitation arrived for Julian to be the keynote speaker at the Global Integrity Summit, a Davos-like conference for tech leaders and media personalities. His topic, dripping with irony, was truth and transparency in the digital age. It's perfect, Chloe said, her eyes gleaming. It's his home turf. He'll feel untouchable. The hubris will be off the charts. He'll have the whole event locked down, Emma countered, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. I can't just walk in and accuse him. You won't have to, Alistair said. He tapped a few commands into his tablet. A picture of a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut appeared on the screen. This is Sarah Jenkins. She's moderating his keynote. She's one of the toughest investigative journalists in the business. She owes my foundation a favor for funding her documentary on dark money in politics. More importantly, she hates frauds. The plan was audacious. Sarah Jenkins, armed with a dossier of Emma's evidence, would conduct the Q&A after Julian's speech. She wouldn't ambush him with accusations. She would do it with his own words and with Emma's. The day of the summit, Emma felt sick with nerves. She wasn't at the conference hall. She was with Alistair and Chloe in a secure viewing suite nearby, watching the live feed on a massive screen. She had done her part. She had written a formal, eloquent statement and had given Sarah Jenkins her blessing to use her research, her words, her story. The broadcast began. There was Julian on a massive stage, bathed in a reverent blue light. He was at the peak of his powers, delivering a smooth, charismatic speech about the importance of living an authentic life. He even had the gall to reference his divorce. Recently, he said, his voice thick with false emotion, "I had to make a difficult choice to align my private life with my public values of honesty and growth. It was painful, but living your truth is never easy." Emma felt Alistair's hand find hers under the table. She gripped it tightly. Julian finished his speech to thunderous applause. He sat down beaming as Sarah Jenkins took the seat opposite him. She started with a few softball questions, lulling him into a state of comfortable arrogance. Then she shifted. "Julian, your book, The Architect of You, is built on a very powerful central metaphor of constructing a life. It's incredibly detailed. I was curious about your research process." Julian preened. "It was years of work, deep personal intellectual exploration. It really came from my soul." "Interesting," Sarah said, looking down at her notes, "because I have here some academic papers from 2012, written by a then Emma Vance, that explore the exact same theme, the construction of persona in the Renaissance. The language is remarkably similar. For instance, you write, 'To be authentic is to be the sole architect of your own reality.' A fascinating turn of phrase. Almost identical to Ms. Vance's 2011 dissertation proposal, which states, 'The Renaissance ideal was to be the sole architect of one's public reality.'" A flicker of panic in Julian's eyes. The audience murmured. Sarah pressed on her voice like ice. "In Chapter 3, you discuss the facade of legacy, Ms. Vance's research uses the exact same term, the facade of legacy, in relation to the Medici family. On page 184, you use an anecdote about Michelangelo. That anecdote is lifted almost verbatim from an email Ms. Vance sent you in 2013, which we have a copy of. Shall I go on?" The color drained from Julian's face. He was sputtering, trying to interrupt. This is an ambush. My work with my ex-wife was a collaboration. She was my partner. Was she a collaborator when you registered the copyright solely in your name?" Sarah countered, her voice sharp. "Was she a collaborator when you pocketed the entirety of the 8-figure advance? We spoke to your publisher. Her name is not mentioned on any contract. In fact, we have a statement from Ms. Vance herself." And then on the giant screen behind the stage, a picture of Emma appeared. Not a paparazzi shot, but a professional, dignified headshot they had taken days before. Beside it, her statement began to scroll. "I am not a victim or a gold digger," the statement read. "I am a scholar. The core concepts, the research, and the intellectual framework of The Architect of You were my work. I am proud of that work, and I will not allow it to be used to promote a false narrative of authenticity, nor to be used as a weapon to publicly shame me. The truth, as Mr. Thorne is so fond of saying, has a way of coming out. The room was in stunned silence. Julian Thorne, the great guru of truth, was staring at the screen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, live in front of his most important peers. He was being exposed not just as a liar, but as a thief. The cameras zoomed in on his face, no longer smug, but pale and sweating. The architect had been unmasked, revealing nothing but a hollow frame behind the beautiful facade. The reckoning had arrived. The silence in the conference hall was a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. On the massive screen, Julian Thorne's face, once a carefully curated mask of enlightened confidence, was now a canvas of pure, unfiltered horror. The camera operator, sensing a historic moment, held the close-up, refusing to cut away. The world watched as the architect of you was publicly deconstructed beam by rotten beam. He didn't just look guilty, he looked erased. In the quiet viewing suite, the only sound was the sharp intake of Chloe's breath. Emma sat perfectly still, her hand held firmly in Alistair's. She wasn't watching Julian's face. She was watching the words on the screen. Her words, her truth, finally illuminated for all to see. It wasn't a feeling of triumph that washed over her, but one of profound, solemn relief, like a patient taking their first breath after a long and suffocating fever. The noise in her head, the constant echo of Julian's gaslighting, and her own self-doubt had finally ceased. Alistair squeezed her hand gently. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low. Quiet, she whispered, a small, wondering smile touching her lips. "The storm. I think it's finally over." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of profound respect. "No," he said, his grey eyes soft but resolute. "The storm is just beginning for him. For you, this is the dawn." The fallout was a digital tsunami. Before Julian could even be escorted off the stage by stunned event staff, the clip was being sliced, diced, and shared across every platform. Thorne fraud. The Great Pretender and his stand with Emma Vance exploded globally. The initial trickle of outrage became a flood. Celebrities who had once touted his book as their Bible posted hurried statements of condemnation. Brands that had sponsored his podcast issued press releases severing all ties. His publisher, facing a public relations nightmare, released a statement within 3 hours. "In light of new information regarding the authorship of The Architect of You, we are immediately suspending all promotion and distribution of the title and will be conducting a full review of our relationship with Mr. Thorne." It was corporate speak for a public execution. Crystal, his model girlfriend, quietly deleted every photo of him from her Instagram feed. His powerful friends stopped returning his calls. The machine that had protected and promoted him turned on him with merciless efficiency. The final humiliating image came a week later, a grainy paparazzi photo of Julian unshaven and haggard in a wrinkled tracksuit, frantically putting trash bins out in front of his empty penthouse. The man who had preached about designing one's life looked like he had lost the blueprint to his own. Emma, however, refused to get drawn into the spectacle of his demise. While the world feasted on the schadenfreude she and Alistair were building, her new legal team, a phalanx of New York's sharpest minds funded by Alistair, moved with swift precision. The settlement meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a dictation of terms. Emma sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, as her lawyers laid out the undeniable evidence of intellectual property theft, and demanded reparations, not alimony, but a figure representing her share of the book's profits and damages for copyright infringement. Julian's legal team, knowing they were beaten, folded without a fight. With the first transfer of funds, she didn't buy a new apartment or a new wardrobe. Her first act was to sign the charter for the Vance Institute for Historical Studies. Its mission was clear: to fund and promote the work of scholars, particularly women, in fields historically dominated by men. Its first grant was awarded to a young art historian who had discovered compelling evidence that a famous sculpture attributed to a 17th-century master was in fact the work of his uncredited and forgotten sister. Her next meeting was with the acquisitions editor of a prestigious university press. The editor, a woman with kind eyes and a deep respect for academia, didn't just want to publish her original manuscript on Gentileschi. She wanted to publish a new expanded edition. "We also want you to write a new introduction," the editor said, "about your journey, about what it means to reclaim a narrative, your story. It's as important as the history you write about." For the first time, Emma cried. Not tears of sorrow or anger, but of overwhelming gratitude. Throughout it all, Alistair was her silent, steadfast partner. He never overshadowed her, never spoke for her. He simply created a space where she could be heard. Their relationship, born in the glare of a media firestorm, settled into a rhythm that was quiet, private, and deeply authentic. One evening, he came to her small Brooklyn apartment, the apartment she had decided to keep a reminder of, where she had started her new life. He found her covered in flour, attempting to bake bread, her tiny kitchen a chaotic mess. He didn't laugh at the mess. He simply rolled up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, washed his hands, and started helping her knead the dough. "You know," he said, his hands working alongside hers, "my life was very orderly before I met you. Every minute scheduled, every interaction vetted. I'm sorry for disrupting it," she said with a small smile. "Don't be," he replied, stopping to look at her, his eyes serious. "It was orderly, but it was grey. You brought the color back, Emma. You make the noise of the world bearable." A few months later, they stood on the terrace of his penthouse. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The space, unlike Julian's cold, minimalist trophy home, was warm and lived in, filled with books stacked on every surface and art that was challenging and personal. He handed her an advance copy of her book, The Power of Persona Artemisia Gentileschi and the Forging of a Legacy, by Dr. Emma Vance. Her name, her title, her work. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters. "I used to stand in a place just like this and feel like the smallest person in the world," she confessed, her voice soft. "He told me that I was nothing without him, that I would die alone." Alistair wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. "He was a fool," he murmured into her hair. "A man that insecure could never understand a woman like you. He didn't understand the irony of his own curse." Emma leaned back against his chest, finally understanding. "He thought it was an ending," she said, a sense of wonder in her voice. "But it was a catalyst. If he hadn't said those things, if he hadn't pushed me out so cruelly, I would never have gone to that gala. I would never have met you. I would never have found the courage to fight for my work." Julian's curse wasn't a prophecy. It was an accidental gift. His attempt to consign her to oblivion was the very thing that had forced her into the light. He had meant to be the architect of her destruction, but instead, he had merely laid the foundation for her magnificent reconstruction. She turned in Alistair's arms, looking up at him. The love she saw in his eyes was not the possessive, conditional affection she had once known, but a deep, quiet partnership built on mutual respect and a shared truth. The city lights below no longer seemed to mock her, but to celebrate with her. It was a new dawn, bright and clear, and infinite with promise. And it was all hers. Emma Vance's story is a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by someone else's opinion, especially the opinion of those who try to diminish us. It's a testament to the fact that the end of one chapter, no matter how painful, is often the necessary prelude to a far better one. Her journey from a cursed ex-wife to a celebrated scholar, hand in hand, with a man who saw her for who she truly was, shows us that the most profound comebacks are rooted in reclaiming our own truth and our own voice. Julian's curse was meant to be her prison, but it became the key that unlocked her true potential. If this story of resilience, justice, and unexpected love moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the most incredible real-life dramas. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Let me know in the comments below.